For days, it's been one of the most talked about national debates, the government's decision to rehire nearly 500 retired civil servants. It's a move that's sparked public backlash, raised questions about fairness in hiring practices, and ignited strong opposition from some of the country's largest unions. Minister of Labour and Public Service Pia Glover-Roll has defended the decision, saying these retirees were brought back as consultants to help reform the public service and pass down institutional knowledge. But critics, particularly the union leaders, say this decision is not only unfair but could be blocking opportunities for younger professionals who have long been waiting for their chance to rise within the ranks. Tonight, we go straight to the heart of the controversy as we sit down with three union leaders who are eager to join the conversation. And on the record, we are committed to balanced and fair discussions. And as such, we did reach out to extend an invitation to the government. However, they have respectfully declined our invitation to appear on tonight's show. So stay tuned as we get started on the other side of this break. This is On the Record, and tonight we are pleased to welcome Kimsley Ferguson, the Bahamas Public Services Union President. Kimsley, welcome to the show. Welcome back to On the Record. I know this is your first time in this rodeo, so we're gonna dive right in. But thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you, Jerome, and good evening, Bahamas. It's a pleasure to be with you on the record.
Well, first of all, let's get straight to the subject. Do you believe the government's reasoning for rehiring retirees holds any merit?
It's a question that has to be answered based on the category of individuals that we're speaking to. I know for a fact that in the minister's response, they sort of threw the police under the bus to some extent, with a view that there would be some backtracking. But to be very frank, there are particular policies that governs the re-engagement of police officers, not to the point where they're prejudicing some other individuals' prospect of advancing. And so what we have been speaking to is the fact that there are some persons that are being brought back that is disadvantaging individuals and not allowing them to advance in relation to upward mobility. Mm-hmm. And so that was really, really the crux of what the union's concerns were. We don't accept the excuse that persons are being brought back because there's a lack of proper skills. We hold to the fact that there are some persons who occupied the top positions, and if they failed to mentor the way that they should have, then that's an indictment on them.
So in government's response, it has been said that these individuals are being brought back to fill some gaps as they move towards succession planning, or they put in place a succession plan. So let me ask you this, from where you said, why has there not been proper succession planning within the public service. And this isn't something that I'm putting at the feet of this administration, because succession planning isn't something that starts overnight or with a particular administration.
Jerome, I want to agree with you there. And it is the responsibility of the government. And when I say that, I want to speak to successive administrations who would have failed to do what was necessary to ensure that we had the best and the brightest at the helm. I do believe that there are some very good prospects in the public service that sit beneath a number of the senior public officials, particularly the permanent secretary level. In their absence, they have undersecretaries that act in their absence. And so, again, if you are able to hold the ministry in the absence of the substantive person, I would like to agree that you're very capable of occupying the seat. Now, again, the issue of them being brought back, I believe that there are a number of people who may have reached that pensionable point and have retired and still have, to some extent, a contribution to offer. My advice on that issue is that those persons will be brought back and are able to share, but not in the capacity that they previously occupied.
So that brings me right to my next question. Is it ethical and sustainable for retired civil servants to receive both pension and full pay as coming back?
I am so excited that you asked that question in the face of the fact that there is the complaint that we're challenged financially. It appears, though, that this complaint only presents itself particularly when it comes to a certain category of people. Because when it comes to the upper echelon, there's no problem with finding funding. But when it comes to the small man, the government seems to have a challenge. And so, again, if there's going to be, so to speak, funding available or made available, let's make sure it's done straight across the board. Again, if it's a policy that speaks to persons receiving salary plus pension, then let's let it be straight across the board. Again, there was a point in time when police officers used to receive salary and pension.
But here is my issue. We are, and this is to an earlier point, we are financially challenged in so many ways. The government has just tabled its mid-year budget. We in the midst of looking at where the country's finances are, and we've been hearing again over and over of how challenged we are in some areas. But you're now talking about people who have worked for whatever period of time, are on pension, are receiving that pension, and are now back in the service. How do we justify that? What message does that send to the rest of the civil servants, particularly those who cannot get raises, who cannot get increments? What message does that send?
It doesn't send a very good message, because it's very discouraging for persons who aspire to reach the top. Again, the persons who may be benefiting from, let me backtrack just a bit, Jerome. I've seen, and this is my view, the position of permanent secretary in the public service has become politicized. At one point, it may have been political, but it wasn't so glaringly noticeable. Now, we see, instead of the permanent secretaries advising their ministers, they're now taking directives. And so it's become politicized. And so successive administrations have brought back persons to occupy those positions who they were comfortable with. And so to retire means that you would have ceased to occupy the office that you had. And so if you see the need, or you see that there's an individual that still has some contribution to make, bring them back in another capacity, maybe form a committee or something of that sort. But let's not disadvantage that individual that has been in a holding pattern, so to speak, for years with a hope to get to the top spot.
You mentioned that you have seen this. You have seen the politicization of permanent secretaries in some instances and others in the government. Is this move being viewed? And I've seen the comments. Is this move being viewed as political patronage?
I think it is being viewed that way. Again, the Prime Minister has what you call the power to appoint permanent secretaries, not only to appoint, but to remove particular individuals. And so we've actually been seeing that play out, Jerome, where certain individuals are moved and certain individuals are put in particular position. We've seen individuals ostracized, if I can get away with that word, to some extent, for extended periods of time, receiving the taxpayers' money, but literally doing nothing for it.
Does this go against general orders?
Well, it does. Somewhere around General Orders 734 through 737, it speaks to the re-engagement of senior public officials, but it also placed conditions on the return of those individuals. One of the main conditions that it's supposed to be recognized is not to prejudice the prospects of serving officers. And if they're engaged, they ought to come back in another capacity, as well as they are supposed to be temporarily brought back, not for any extended period of time. What we're seeing now, we're seeing permanent secretaries brought back on very, very, very handsome contracts. And, you know,
Jerome, in addition to receiving your pension.
In addition to receiving the pension. But please note, me as a public servant, I have to work for 65 until I reach 65 before I get a pension. Permanent secretaries, they do 2 5-year stints and they go home with all the perks.
What has been the response from your union members? I have seen public response. I have seen people responding, particularly in the social media spaces. I hear discussions. But what has been the response from your union members, particularly the younger ones?
The younger ones have taken the position that, hey, it doesn't appear that I'm going to ascend to these positions while the government would have made a promise and a commitment that we are seeking the best and the brightest, but they're of the view that they're never going to get the opportunity. While they may advance to a certain point, there are certain positions that are reserved for particular people under particular administrations.
The argument will also be made that across the public service there have been promotions, there have been additional hires within some government ministries and departments, and so there has been an injection of new blood and new people within the public service and some level of reform. Again, I'm not here to defend, but that has been the response from government and a pushback to some of the criticisms that have come.
Yes, the government has hired some individuals, but what we're finding is because the young people are of the view that the top spot is reserved for particular persons, what they do, they add a notch to their resume and they move on. Mm-hmm. And so the aspirations of those young people are actually killed.
Which I guess brings me to another point. Because often the public service is challenged with getting the best and the brightest. Is this seen, though, as a setback from young people who are qualified, who can make a difference, who can bring that innovation, who can bring that injection of new ideas and new blood? Is this seen as a setback and a deterrent for those folks to say, you know what, maybe I need to look at private sector because I don't see a pathway forward?
It does, and we're finding that a lot of individuals who would have received appointments in the public service, after a particular period of time, we find that they begin to look back into the private sector simply because of the fact that, one, they want to be properly compensated.
Sure.
The compensation is not competitive at all. And what we are seeing again, and I go back to this particular point, Jerome, we are seeing only certain people are receiving proper compensation for their labor. We are seeing...
By certain people, you mean people who have political affiliations?
Well, certain people who have political affiliations, but the very top spot, if you see the benefits, it was suggested that there is going to be a salary review in the public service so that we can be competitive with the private sector. Again, we saw the salary review done for the permanent secretaries, and it came to a screeching halt at that very point. And so there are other persons in the public service that are wondering when is it going to continue, when it's going to reach to the level that I am at, so that I can make a decision as to whether or not I want to do the rest of my years here, or I need to seek employment otherwise.
And the reality is the cost of living continues to skyrocket. When you have eggs, $8, $9, $10, just at that level for a dozen, and you have, the cost of living continues to skyrocket. Buying a home is extremely difficult. Everything is more expensive. Everything costs more money, but it doesn't appear that we are keeping pace with salaries. And I don't just want to say in the public service. This is an issue, throughout the country, I think, but that's a show for another day. But let me ask you this, though. From where you said, what kinds of structural reforms should be implemented to prevent the future dependency on retirees? Because the argument is we need the skills, we need the people with the know-how to come back, if only temporarily, to bridge the gap. But what do we do now to avoid this from happening in the future?
Training, retraining. We need it. Training in the public service prior was a consistent thing. Mm-hmm. I guess we see the need to put on a seminar just to say that we had one this year, but when I was a young manager in the public service, we went to seminars. Omega Institute, the permanent secretaries made certain that their managers were up to speed. There is a changing times, and so the way in which you manage another generation that's coming on board, you need to be able to make the adjustment because all your fingers are not long alike. And so we had to be able to adjust to what was coming to us to make certain that we saw the human resource as the thing that was absolutely necessary to cause the objective of the employer to be realized. And so there is really no training. We have the Oracle Fusion program. That's adjusting a number of things that we have in our agreement, a legal binding agreement. But the union doesn't even know how the Oracle Fusion is going to function. And so we see the employee representative being ostracized to some extent, being kept blind to a great extent. We're having questions. The questions are, how is this going to affect my promotion? How is this going to affect my annual appraisal? And these are questions we're not going to be, we're not in a position to answer. We had a meeting the other day, I guess, with some employees that were contracted to deal with the Oracle Fusion program, but there was no government representative in the room to answer the tough questions that only someone that works in the public service can answer. And so, again, we adjourned the meeting until such time as the representatives could make themselves available. So myself and the president of the BUT has not been updated or apprised on what direction this thing is taking and how we're going to be involved so that we can be able to answer the questions that our members may have.
We've got just about a minute left, so we've got to wrap here. What's next? You know, you've heard we've heard what the public, Joe Public is saying to some extent. You've heard from your workers. What's next? What's the union's position now on this whole issue of these returning retirees?
Well, I'll tell you, we always seek to exhaust diplomacy. We want a more intimate relationship with the employer so that we can make certain that whatever benefits are there, that our members can actually share in those benefits. We want to be able to say to our members, after a period of time, after you've met the requisite qualifications and time in post, that you're going to be able to advance. We want to be able to say to them, look, these things are available to you. The sky is the limit. And so that is a position that we're taking. I want to say in conclusion that failure to enhance the relationship, you're going to find that we're going to have to begin to speak to people from another perspective.
I think that's a good point to leave it right there. Kimsley Ferguson, thank you so very much for coming on and sharing with us. We appreciate giving us a lot of insight, a lot to think about. Thank you so much, sir. All the best to you.
Thank you, Jerome.
All right. When we come back, the Nurses Union president shares her perspective. This is On the Record. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to On the Record. Our conversation continues with the Nurses Union President, Muriel Lightbourne. Welcome to On the Record. Welcome back to On the Record. As you reminded me, this isn't your first time in here. Happy to have you with us. We're going to get right into our line of questioning today. How has this decision by the government to re-engage these retirees impacted nurses within the public sector?
Well, first, I would like to say thank you for having me once again on the record, and how this decision has impacted our nurses. Well, it's had, it's made our nurses feel, we like to say some kind of way, because
yes,
we're feeling some kind of way. For the most part, me personally, as the president of the union, I feel that it is somewhat like a slap in the face to our nurses, considering that you can bring persons back, almost 500 persons back. 480 persons, you said that they're being paid pension plus their salary as the law requires, and that is where it sticks to me. We have nurses, Mrs. Sawyer. Here I have a list of nurses, 26 nurses awaiting appointment.
26?
26 nurses awaiting appointment from 2023. And they are working tirelessly every day, doing home visits, going into the community, working in the clinics, doing all these things. Mr. Sawyer.
When you say awaiting appointment, help me in the audience to understand what that means.
They are not employed because they have not been appointed. When our Constitution states that where there is a vacancy, right, where there's a vacancy, a person could be appointed on a probationary period, and there's a number of ways that they can be appointed to the service. For nurses, we are appointed on a probationary period. This appointment has not happened. Mr. Sawyer, the government of this country, the Minister of Health, I must say, saw it fit to go abroad, brought nurses into this country who have been appointed and are working. They are being paid. You understand what we're saying? And these nurses are here still not appointed.
So, again, the government has said they have engage these retirees, and they've, in this case, I want to add in the foreign nurses, because there is a shortage of nurses in the country.
Mr. Sawyer, if there's a shortage of nurses in the country, why are these nurses not appointed to fill in that vacancy? These are a list. Not only that.
26?
26 nurses. That's who I know.
Get past the 26
Mr. Sawyer, those are the nurses that came to me to
those are the ones that you know of.
The ones that I know of. Then we have nurses that are still waiting confirmation, who may have been appointed and have not yet been confirmed in their post. Then we have, Mr. Sawyer, we have nurses, graduate nurses, we call them intern nurses, who are waiting to be paid from November. They're not being paid. This is what bothers me when I hear.
So from November?
Yes.
We now, just the last of February, we now going into March, and they haven't been paid?
They've not been paid.
They working?
They're working, Mr. Sawyer. These are nurses who are coming to work every day. Coming to work every day, Mr. Sawyer. Not only that, just recently, and I want to say shout out congratulations to those 70 nurses that have successfully passed their council exams. What are we going to do? How are we going to add these people on? And they are not ashamed to say to us that they didn't have the money. That bothers me. They're not ashamed to tell us that they don't have the money. Mr. Sawyer, we have nurses who have worked what they've been doing home visits, going into the community, doing home visits. And for the past 5 years, they have not gotten paid their mileage allowance. For 5 years, some even longer.
So how do they think they're getting there? Are they using like a transporter from Star Trek to get to these places? If they have to get the home visits, there is a mileage consideration. Mr.
Sawyer, and that's what bothers me when I hear, and I copy it because I don't want to misquote.
Sure.
When I heard the minister says, that's the Minister of Labor said, she further clarified that 480 of these retirees are receiving both their pension and full pay as mandated by the law. But the law said these nurses are supposed to be appointed. The law says for those nurses who are waiting confirmation, the law says the same Constitution speaks to the fact that once they've been received their appointment 6 weeks prior to their probationary period, that they should be already have the knowledge of whether they're going to be confirmed in their post. Why is not happening, Mr. Sawyer? That's the law. Does the law only suit one set of person? This is our Constitution we're talking about. So that's what you're telling me, that the law only works for certain category of public servants and not others? Mr. Sawyer, we have nurses who were promoted in April. Their promotion was effective. No, they was promoted on probationary period. Their probations ended in October. Guess what? They took their acting allowance, but they have not yet confirmed these nurses. Mr. Sawyer,
I don't even need to ask you any more questions. I just need to let you talk at this point.
Mr. Sawyer,
this is a conundrum.
Do you think now that, and I wondered how the minister felt when she said that. I wonder how she felt, because I didn't take it good. My nurses did not receive that well. Listen to me. I heard Latre spoke about they bringing in these people for effective delivery of service. You ever walk into the hospital? I hope nobody, Mr. Sawyer, who was administrator or in the hierarchy of managing the hospital or anywhere, the clinics, is one of these people. Because if you really do an assessment, they have not been doing a good job. So who are they coming back to consult? Who are they coming back to consult on what? When you have not done... Mr. Sawyer?
Speak. Listen.
Listen to me. They've not been effective in managing the hospital. The hospital, right now, it took you almost 100 years to open up one accident and emergency. And while they were, Mr. Sawyer, listen to me. Almost 100 years, Mr. Sawyer, to open up accident and emergency.
It felt like 99.
I am telling you.
And the reason I laugh is because every time I pass, I say, well, how much longer? What else? That's why I laugh. I mean, it's a very serious issue, but it struck something in me because I feel the same way.
And so, just in December, they had the Governor General visit to open up accident and emergency. Open, quote unquote, because it's not opened. You're having you have a situation where the environment really ain't conducive for working. You have accident emergency, quote unquote, opened. No bathroom facilities for the nurses to use. The one bathroom facility that they have out there, and where the area what used to be the canteen, and they turn that now into triage and asthma bay. The bathroom in that area is not working. You have one stall working, which means that the nurse, the nurses, the doctors, the patients, everybody have to use that one bathroom stall. And who are you bringing back? How are you going to bring back these people? Anybody? I hope, Mr. Sawyer, that none of these persons who manages the hospital or the clinics out there, none of them better be in those persons who they bring back, because they've not done a good job. We cannot consult.
I have to ask this. I wouldn't be doing my job if I did not ask. But are these concerns, or have these concerns and these outstanding issues been presented to the Minister of Labour as well as the Minister of Health? Are they aware of these things from your perspective?
From my perspective, Mr. Sawyer, I've been going back and forth with the appointments for the confirmation of these nurses, back and forth, Mr. Sawyer. Let me tell you something. I have nurses. I literally had a nurse waiting on appointment, came to me, and she was in tears. You know how you laugh when I said it was like 100 years, right? So when she came to me and she said, Madam President, I done get evicted twice.
What?
I have been evicted twice. I thought this girl was kidding with me, right? And so that's when the group of nurses came to visit me. So I said to her, I just pushed it off because I really thought she was just kidding with me. And then everybody said, Madam President, she's not joking. She is not joking. Twice she has been evicted. But you brought foreign nurses into the country. You established them. As a matter of fact, before some of them came, they'd already had everything in place to come to go to work. One of these same nurses on this list, who is still waiting for appointment. See, this is the list. Still waiting on appointments. She had said to me, she said, Madam President, when they brought those foreign nurses in, at that time, she was there. She was there in the room, and they promised them that their appointment was coming then. She said, Madam President, they even gave them an advance in salary.
What?
Okay. Tell me who this law that the minister is talking about, who this law suits. Because obviously not us.
All the questions we had prepared here have completely gone out the door. But I have to ask you, how then do you and your nurses present yourself every day to look after patients with things like this happening either to you or to nurses standing alongside you? How does this affect their ability to do their jobs?
Mrs. Sawyer, some of them, I could tell you, I have young nurses who are saying, Madam President, I am so discouraged. I spoke to a group of nurses on Monday, and one of the nurses said to me, she said, Madam President, I love my job, but I hate my employer.
Wow.
That's what she said to me. She said, I love nursing, but I hate my employer. Nurses are so discouraged, Mrs. Sawyer. They are discouraged, and they go in every day, because they love the clients. They love what they do. But how long we could have them going on the fact that I love my clients, I love what I do, but you're not being compensated.
Yeah, love of job does not pay your bills.
No, it does not.
You can't take love of job to BPL and to the food store and these other places.
Hello, because the nurse who's waiting on appointment, she can take the love of her job to her landlord.
Mm-hmm. Evicted twice. Pardon me. As we get ready to wrap up, I'd even give you some extra time in this segment. What next? What are you and your members prepared to do next?
What I am prepared to do, Mr. Sawyer, I am after the minister would have made this statement. It took me plenty nights. I sat up and I went through Employment Act. I went through general orders. I went through the Constitution. I told you I never read so much in all my life, Mr. Sawyer. And guess what? I even opened up the Bible again.
You needed a higher calling.
I said, God, something has to be done. Mrs. Sawyer, I can't fathom that you could go about this life and you could just discard these people. Nurses are essential workers.
Yes, they are. They are.
And I feel sometimes, Mr. Sawyer, that they don't too much care, because when they are sick, they don't present themselves to these institutions.
To show for another day. Madam President, I thank you so much. This has been an insightful and powerful segment. I hope and I pray that the powers that be are not living in an echo chamber and are hearing what is being said on this show, but also from your members and from people on the outside, because this is egregious.
Yes,
this
it
is egregious, and I hope and pray that the next time we speak, that these issues will be resolved. And you know, from our perspective, that's what we do in this business. We bring to light injustices, and this is a grave injustice. If this is the case,
yes,
if this is indeed the case.
It is indeed the case.
So thank you so much for coming on. Continue the work that you do. Tell the nurses, be encouraged. Be encouraged. I know they can't get out of the food store. I know, but be encouraged. All right. So thank you so very much. When we come back,
I appreciate you.
Thank you too. We appreciate you. We appreciate all that you do, and thank you so much. And to the nurses out there, listen, the healthcare system would be far worse without you and the work that you do every day. So thank you. When we come back, President Belinda Wilson shares her hot takes and addresses the hearsay. We'll be back right after this break. Welcome back. This is our final segment, and our guest up to this point has been very vocal since day one. We expect more of the same tonight. We have the Bahamas Union of Teachers and the Bahamas National Alliance Trade Union Congress President Belinda Wilson. Belinda, no stranger to us here on the record, no stranger to the public. Let's dive right in.
Good evening. My pleasure to be here.
As I see you got all your bright yellow. You come with the sunshine.
I'm ready.
You're ready. All right. So let's start out with this. Do you believe that the government's reasoning for rehiring these retirees holds any merit?
I believe it does not hold merit, and especially in the instances where you have the senior persons coming back. And let me also state this too. There are some teachers that returned, but even if those teachers would have served as a principal per se, they don't come back as a principal. They would come back as a supply teacher in the classroom. So the response that the government has given is unacceptable.
So I just want to use this very clearly. So when they come back as a supply teacher, that's a position that somebody else could have filled.
Yes, but let's say you have a subject area where there is a shortage.
Right.
So if you have a shortage in mathematics, in English language, etc., and you need a teacher, and there is a retiree who's prepared to come to teach, and they're going into the classroom, you don't want to leave the children there just sitting without a teacher. Let me also state too that the teachers, based on the policy, it's the age is 70. So some of the persons that the Minister of Labor spoke about, they are over 70, some of whom have retired more than 15 years ago.
Wait, what?
More than 15 years ago.
So now what challenge does that create? If you have been out of the classroom for 15 years and you come back, what kinds of challenges?
I don't mean the classroom. I'm talking about the persons that they have rehired with the big Garcia contracts and salaries. Some of them have been out of the service for up to 15 years.
What does that do, though, to individuals within the service who are still serving, who are looking for the upward mobility, who is looking for the promotion, who's looking for the increment?
It kills the morale, and it's something called silent rebellion. They don't speak, but their action shows the way that they feel. And so it's like, I'm coming to work, and you said that I must move 5 files from one file cabinet to the next. Well, that's what they do, and they do nothing else. They don't offer any advice. They don't give you any of their views or recommendations, and that kills the service.
So they've disengaged.
They are disengaged, but they did not verbalize it. So people feel as though they're just going along doing their work, but the morale is very, very low.
What has I'm going to ask you directly to your union members, what has been their response?
Well, I could say to you, my union members, my president, when you're ready, let's hit the road.
What they mean?
Let's go demonstrate. Let's walk. Let them see the power of our union, because as one of the previous guests said, she has 26 persons waiting for appointment. I have 405.
How many?
Persons who are waiting confirmations, who are awaiting their payments after they would have been promoted, who are waiting to be reclassified. So for example, let's say you had an associate's degree and you went and you achieved a bachelor's degree. That comes with additional compensation. So persons have been waiting. You have some persons who have been in the service in the 52-week program now for 13 years.
No way.
Who've been waiting for confirmation.
How many years?
10 years. 12
in the 52-week program?
52-week program. I think the person that I have who's been in the 52-week program the longest may be about 15 to 17 years. So when you have Minister Pia Glover-Roll speaking about 480 persons receiving pensions and salaries, I can tell it angers us. It angers us. And we try to use diplomacy. We try to get into meetings. We try to speak to them. But it goes on deaf ear. You speak, you write, you call, and it's as if the government does not care about the common man.
Two things. One, we did invite the minister to be a part of the show. I said it at the beginning in the introduction, but I wanted to be clear. We did give the minister and the government an opportunity to come on to answer some questions they've respectfully declined. When you say the government, you have been within the trade union for a while, you've been at the helm for a while. Is this an issue with just this government, or is this an issue you see with consecutive governments?
It's an issue with consecutive governments, but I would say, and let's just put it out there, the PLP is the government today.
Sure.
The FNM was the government last term. The FNM did have some retirees. However, there is a circular. The circular is dated October the 19th, 2017. And it's the policy on the reemployment of pensioners. But in their clause 2, it says that they will have their pensions ceased. That was rescinded in a subsequent circular dated the 16th of March 2022 to take effect on the 4th of October 2021. And again, clause 2 says the pension of the above officers will not cease. So the PLP government reversed the clause that ceased the pension for those who were re-employed.
So let's speak to the obvious. If you are re-engaged, if you have retired, receiving your pension, as you should, you've worked for it, you've earned it, and you are re-engaged, why should your pension be ceased?
Well, first of all, I'm really not of the view that your pension should cease, but I'm of the view that you should not be coming back in the first place, because you've been in the position for 40 years and you did nothing. Now they say that you're coming back to train the persons that you left there.
Why were you training
that you did not train?
Why didn't you? And that's why didn't you train when you
them
were there?
Right. And furthermore, you are coming back to get salaries to the tune that is almost double what you were making before you left, and you are receiving responsibility allowance of $20,000 per annum.
What's a responsibility allowance?
A responsibility, okay, we have teachers who get responsibility allowance. For example, let's say you are a teacher and you have been appointed by the principal to be a senior assistant.
Okay.
So you would get, let's say, $1,500 for the year.
For the additional.
Okay, for the additional duties.
Yes, okay.
I don't know what additional duties the permanent secretaries do for $20,000 per annum, which is more than the salaries of some of our workers. Yeah. They're also getting a $12,000 housing allowance, and you live in New Providence and work in New Providence.
Again, without
and in this instance, this particular permanent secretary retired December the 3rd of 2024. Their new contract started on December the 4th, 2024. You didn't even go home.
So no break-in service.
You didn't even go home. But what is it that you have done?
So again, help us to understand, what is a housing allowance for?
Well, a housing allowance for our members would be teachers, guidance counselors, librarians who were redeployed. Let's say you live in New Providence, right, and you were reassigned or redeployed to Abaco.
Okay.
So we would have what's called a rental or housing allowance, which is only several $100s that an individual will receive for them to pay.
So why do you need
rent.
a housing allowance if you live in New Providence?
Good question. And the housing allowance is only $480 less than someone who's making a minimum wage salary for an entire year. And when we talk about egregious, when we talk about injustice, this is what we're speaking about.
The government's justification in some cases is that this is to accommodate succession planning. That the succession plan was not put in place or was never carried out, but this is in some instances to accommodate succession planning. Your response?
Okay, succession planning was not even put in place. I agree. Mm-hmm. However, I want to stick on the hierarchy. Not the few police officers who they may have brought in to assist. We know that crime is high. And then also those police officers, some of them are not on the police force. They are in other ministries and government departments. So that's a discussion for another day. But for example, a permanent secretary in a ministry has an undersecretary, a deputy permanent secretary, and others. So let's say, for example, during their time they're on vacation. When you're on vacation, there's an acting permanent secretary that is carrying out your function. So what are you talking about? Succession planning, that you need to bring someone back to the tune of all of these hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not only that, permanent secretaries are not just attached to a ministry per se, they are permanent secretaries throughout the public service. So let's say you have a ministry where a permanent secretary is retiring, but the undersecretary or the deputy permanent secretary at that particular ministry, in your view, may not be ready for the promotion. Well, you have other ministries that you can pull the resources from, and you can promote probably a deputy permanent secretary from another ministry. So whatever excuses that they're making does not hold water for us, especially when we have our teachers who are laboring daily in the classrooms trying to educate our students who are unable to get their rental allowance, their confirmation letters, their reassignments. For example, we have about 330 non-Bahamian teachers who are waiting for re-employment letters from 2018, some of them.
From where?
2018.
A letter?
A letter. But you can quickly turn around a contract for hundreds of thousands of dollars for a senior officer,
You said
public
from
officer.
2018?
2018.
So again, this comes across administrations.
Oh, yeah.
So this is an
I carry
an
no water for
administration.
any of them. All of them have their issues, but the PLP government seems to be more blatant and in your face.
So which brings us now to another question that I have prepared here for you. There has been speculation, and there was something even published in social media over the weekend, that you sought the FNM's nomination for Carmichael and were turned down. Can you confirm or deny that? And do you have political aspirations within the FNM or any other party?
Glad you asked the question. And I'm going to rewind. I applied for a nomination from the Free National Movement in October of 2001, 24 years ago. I did not get the nomination. I ran in May of 2002. In Carmichael, I received 68 votes.
You ran for?
The independent, as an independent candidate. And as I thought about it, I realized that I have not been to a political rally, function, meeting from 1997. I belong to no party. I carry no card for any party, and I carry no allegiance to any party. And if I wanted to run, and I had put in for a nomination, there are two set of people that I would have to consult with: my husband, my daughter, and my family, and the members of the Bahamas Union of Teachers, whom I work for and who pay my salary. So the answer is no. No, I did not apply for a nomination from the FNM. I've only applied for a nomination once in my life from the FNM, which was 24 years ago. And I ran as an independent candidate in Carmichael.
All of this can be verified. All right, so it brings me now to another question. Oftentimes we find that unionists can at times get in bed with politicians. What damage has this done to the union's plight? And by get in bed, I don't mean in the literal sense.
Some of them get in bed in the literal sense. But when you get in bed with the politicians, then you compromise your union and their members. And when you speak, then you become a sounding brass and a timbre, because they know that you're just speaking to put on a show for the public. Because when you finish speaking publicly, they know that they can call you on the phone and you can cut a deal with them behind closed doors, and deals that your members do not know about or do not agree with. And I want to say, whenever you hear me speak, I am telling you, the matter has been ventilated with my executive committee. It has been discussed with my members. And even, for example, like the bi-weekly fight that you've heard publicly. We had a meeting
for payment of public service.
We've had a meeting with the consultants and some of the government persons from the Ministry of Finance. That was December the 19th, 2023. After that meeting, you know, everybody went for Christmas break. But the first week of January the 6th, I had a meeting with my members. At that time, I sent out a survey asking the members, what is your choice for your payment? 83% of the respondents said they want their salaries to remain as monthly. So tell me, what message are you supposed to take to the Prime Minister, to the Minister of Finance, and to the wannabe Prime Minister Simon Wilson? What message are you supposed to take to them? The message I take to them is the message that my members voted for, and I can produce the results of the survey.
That's what your members asked
because we did it digitally. I can produce the results.
And that's what you do. You garner the response of your members. As we wrap up, I want to go back to something that you said earlier. Your members said, "We ready to go. We ready to march. We ready to." And I'm just paraphrasing. We ready to take on some action. What next? I'm asking you now. This, to me, again, as I said, I think is on the minds of a lot of civil servants. But what next for the BUT and for the umbrella organization?
But let me say this: with all of this happening, I penned several letters to the Prime Minister, and so as I sent a video clip to the Prime Minister a few days ago, and my message to him by WhatsApp was, you could meet with the Haitian pastors, but you cannot meet with union leaders who are trying to meet with you to discuss pertinent issues relevant to thousands of workers in this country. And I could say to you, I always meet with my members, and we will meet again to make a decision as to what we're going to do. There's also 7 unions and 2 associations under the Bahamas National Alliance Trade Union Congress. We had our meeting last week. We will continue to discuss this, and they're going to force us to have to make some decisions that's going to be painful for the public and for this country. But I say to the Prime Minister, the time you take to meet with the Haitian pastors, you better come meet with me and the other union leaders. Because as I told you the other day, your time is running out, sir. Tick tock.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We are going to leave it there. We are out of time. As always, you bring a high energy to the show, and you come with a lot of information. And whenever you speak, I think you speak on behalf of the majority of your members. So thank you for coming and sharing that with us. All the best to you.
You're welcome.
And certainly we'll keep you in focus.
My pleasure.
Well, tonight we heard directly from 3 of the country's union leaders that on the record we believe every voice matters. And while the government declined our invitation to participate in tonight's discussion, we remain committed to giving all sides a platform to be heard. To our guests, thank you for your time, your insights, and your representing the concerns of thousands of public sector workers across this country. And most importantly to you, our viewers, thank you for watching, engaging, and of course, staying informed. Once again, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you next time right here on The Record.